درته وخت به ورسره جنګېږي ښه که دوی ووځي بیا.
This is the tank graveyard at Kandahar airfield. It's where they keep the old rusting hulks of the Soviet legacy. And when you're here, you can really start to feel viscerally why people in Afghanistan are so tired of war, because they've been fighting for almost 30 years in this country. And so that's why peace and peace talks have dominated the conversation in the country, even as the violence rises. President Hamid Karzai has publicly called for some kind of reconciliation talks with the Taliban. He wants to sit down with Mullah Omar. The Americans have been really reluctant about this idea. The Europeans have been pushing for it openly. And the Canadians don't seem to have any clear position. Because there are huge questions that hang over some kind of reconciliation process. Who would you talk to exactly? Where? How? And what would you talk about? How would you kind of create a common ground, find some middle ground in this country where it's so polarized? We put some of these questions to the Taliban across Kandahar province, and their answers were not exactly what you'd expect.
که یو څوک د ملا صاحب پر ځای باندې نه بل څوک یو شرعي اسلامي حکومت راولي په ملک کې هم تاسو ته منلو وړ نه دي موږ ته منلو وړ اسلامي حکومت موږ ته منلو وړ.
Many of the Taliban we interviewed said roughly the same thing. They said that they didn't really care who's the leader of Afghanistan, it's just as long as there's a good Islamic president. That's kind of a surprising result when you think about it, that you can send a journalist with a video camera out to interview Taliban, these fighters who are actively engaged in fighting, and they'll say, you know, we don't really mind who's the leader. And that gives some hope to people who are negotiating right now. The fact that the Taliban are not fixated on the idea of Mullah Omar as the president of Afghanistan points to a bit of a weak spot, a bit of a touchy point with the insurgency. A lot of them know that he is not a particularly involved leader, that he's not somebody who has a day-to-day direct involvement in running the insurgency. And asking it was kind of sensitive for our researcher. That's one moment where he felt his life might have been in danger. And in some cases, he didn't ask the question at all because he was worried about how they would react. So the fact that the Taliban are not a particularly strong personality cult, that's encouraging for negotiators. But then when you start to look at the bigger picture, it gets a lot darker and a lot less encouraging, because the Taliban view the foreign influence here in Afghanistan as essentially evil and corrupting. And what the kind of country that they want to live in is very different from the kind of country that a person in Kabul wants to live in. The Taliban want to return to village values. They want Sharia law. And these are things that will be very difficult to swallow for any ordinary urban Afghan who has gotten used to the idea of democracy and human rights. In the end, though, one of the things that is most encouraging is that very, very few of the Taliban we talked to expressed any kind of desire for global jihad. They didn't have a whole lot of desire for taking a terrorist campaign back to the United States or back to Canada. And in fact, many of them said they had never heard this word, Canada. Some of them, many of them, in fact, couldn't point to Canada on a map.
عالم ګور په تلوار پاڅه مور چلونو تا پاڅه مور چلونو تا دا د سنگر نارا پریم دی دا د سنگر نارا پریم دی وطنی بیارا پاڅه مور چلونو تا پاڅه مور چلونو تا دا د سنگر نارا پریم دی دا د سنگر